My name is Diana. I'm 32, and I run operations for a restaurant group that seats 3,000 people a week across 4 locations. I know how a check moves from kitchen to table the way most people know how to tie their shoes. So when my parents called after 3 years of total silence and invited me to dinner to make amends, I should have asked one question before I said yes. Who's really at that table? I didn't ask. I drove 40 minutes to the Belvedere, walked through the front doors, and found 16 members of my family already seated around a long table covered in lobster tails, Wagyu steaks, and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux they'd started pouring before I pulled into the parking lot. My father looked up from the head of the table, smiled, and said what I'd spent my whole life earning. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." He thought he'd cornered me. He hadn't counted on the 2 sentences I was about to whisper to our waiter, or on what his own credit card was about to tell the entire family 15 minutes later. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people face impossible family moments and walk out with their dignity intact. If you've ever been the one expected to pay, to fix, to stay quiet, this story is for you. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. But let me back up a few weeks before the dinner, before the parking lot full of cars I recognized, before my father tried to hand me a bill the size of a mortgage payment. I need to tell you who I was the morning the invitation arrived, because that's the version of me they were counting on, and the version I'd already stopped being. I manage 4 restaurants. Not own. Manage. I built my way up from bussing tables at a steakhouse in Knoxville when I was 17, still smelling like fryer oil on the school bus the next morning. Hostess at 19. Server at 21. Floor manager by 24. Regional operations director by 30. I'm not rich. I have a 2-bedroom condo that's paid off, a retirement account I never touch, and exactly one indulgence, sparkling water. Still or sparkling, that's what I order when I eat out. Every single time. My staff thinks it's a quirk. It's not. When you grow up paying for everyone else's steak, you learn to keep your own tab small enough to walk away from. That morning, I was in my office reviewing a vendor contract for imported olive oil. The kind of Tuesday that makes you forget not everyone's life runs on spreadsheets. And pars. My phone buzzed. I glanced down and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. 3 years of silence. And there it was. A notification from the group chat I'd been removed from the day I became the family's villain. Family had added me back. I stared at that notification for a full minute before I opened it. Family. The little red heart emoji my mother had picked out 6 years ago when she created the group. Back when it was used for sharing Thanksgiving recipes. And photos of Brooke's dog. I hadn't seen that heart in 3 years. The chat history was clean. Nothing above my mother's newest message, which meant they'd either cleared it or, more likely, they had a second group without me the whole time. Mom's message was warm, careful, almost rehearsed. She said and Dad had been doing a lot of reflecting and wanted to invite me to dinner at the Belvedere to start healing as a family. Just the 4 of us. She wrote, her, Dad, me, and Brooke. A small dinner, a fresh start, then a second message. 30 seconds later, with the line that should have told me everything. Family takes care of family. Sweetheart, it's time we remembered that. Family takes care of family. She used to say that when I was 19, and she needed my server tips to cover the electric bill. She said it when I was 23, and Dad needed a cosigner on the truck. She said it when Brooke's first apartment fell through, and I quietly paid the deposit. Family takes care of family had always meant one thing in my house. Diana takes care of family. I read the message twice. I noticed my mother hadn't said sorry. She hadn't said we were wrong. She'd said it was time to heal. Passive voice. No subject. No one responsible. I typed back, I'll be there. Then I set my phone face down on the desk. and went back to the olive oil contract, pretending my hands weren't shaking. 3 years ago, my sister Brooke decided to open a cafe. Not a business plan, not a market study. A cafe because she'd seen one in Charleston with exposed brick and a natural menu, and thought, I could do that. She was 26, had never managed so much as a lemonade stand, and needed a $75,000 small business loan. The bank said yes, with a cosigner. That cosigner was supposed to be me. Mom called on a Sunday. Dad sat beside her, arms folded, already angry before I'd answered. Brooke needed the loan. The cafe was her dream. I had good credit, a stable job, a history of saying yes. Just sign the papers. Diana. I asked to see the business plan first. Brooke didn't have one. I asked about her projected margins, her lease terms, her supplier contracts. Brooke stared at me like I'd insulted her cooking. Mom's voice went flat. She's your sister. You don't need a spreadsheet to love your sister. I said no, not because I didn't love Brooke. I did, but I'd spent enough years in the restaurant industry watching people pour savings into concepts with no foundation. And I knew what $75,000 of someone else's debt looks like at 3 a.m. when the cafe is dark and the loan is still due. Dad stood up. He pointed at the door and said the thing that closed it for 3 years. If you won't help this family, you're not part of it. I drove home. The next morning, I'd been removed from family. Nobody called. Nobody texted. For 3 years, I was the daughter who loved money more than her own sister. Here's the part that's hard to admit. The silence almost broke me. Not because they were right. I knew they weren't. Because I missed being needed. That's the real wound. And it took me 2 years. And a therapist named Dr. Kwan, to name it properly. I had been the family fixer since I was 17. First paycheck went to groceries. Tax refund went to Mom's dental work. When Dad's transmission blew, I paid for the rebuild and told him it was covered under warranty because I knew he'd never accept a handout from his 22-year-old daughter. When Brooke got married, I covered the florist, the photographer, and half the reception. And I smiled while Mom gave the toast about raising 2 strong girls. 2 strong girls. 1 bill. I didn't do it because I'm generous. I did it because I'd learned, somewhere around age 15, that the fastest way to keep the peace in my family was to make sure nobody had to ask twice. Ask once. Jenapi. Everyone's happy. Dinner is quiet. I trained them. I taught my parents that my wallet was a vending machine. Insert guilt. Receive check. And when the machine finally set out of order, they didn't troubleshoot it. They unplugged it and walked away. So, when Mom's message popped up after 3 years, family takes care of family. Sweetheart, I felt the old reflex fire in my chest, like a muscle I hadn't stretched in years. Go. Fix it. Pay whatever it costs. Make it quiet again. But I also heard Dr. Kwan's voice, steady as a metronome. You taught them you would always pay. That was your mistake to fix, not by paying more, but by stopping. My coworker, Jess, told me not. She sat across from me at lunch the day after the invitation and said, Diana, this has ambush written all over it. And I remember laughing because Jess had never even met my family, and she could see it clearer than I could. My sous chef, Marco, said the same thing. Shorter, don't. But I'd already decided, not because I believed them, not because I expected an apology. I wanted to sit across from my parents and find out whether 3 years had changed anything, or whether the silence had just been a longer version of the same conversation we'd always had. One where I was expected to listen, agree, and pay. I wanted closure, even if closure meant confirming the door was nailed shut. There was something else, too, and I'm going to be honest about it because I think some of you will understand. I missed my mother, not the mother who orchestrated, not the one who kept score, the one who taught me to make cornbread in a cast iron skillet when I was 9, and sang along with Dolly Parton while the butter melted. That mother hadn't called in 3 years, either, but some nights I still heard the Dolly Parton. So I told Jess I was going. I told Marco I'd be fine. I told myself the same thing, and almost believed it. I set one rule: one dinner, civil, no money, and if it felt wrong, I'd leave before dessert. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to my steering wheel the morning of. One dinner, then home. That sticky note was still there when I pulled into the Belvedere's parking lot and counted the cars. I dressed simple on purpose. Black slacks, a gray blouse I wear to vendor meetings, flat shoes, no jewelry except the small silver watch I bought myself the year I made regional director. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I'd earned it, and it kept good time, and that felt like enough. I didn't want to walk into the Belvedere looking like I was performing. My family already thought I flaunted my success. The truth was I drove a 9-year-old Honda and meal prepped on Sundays like half of America. The drive took 40 minutes. I played no music. My hand stayed at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, somewhere around the highway merge. My stomach started to tighten in a way I recognized. The same feeling I get when a walk-in cooler fails on a Friday night, and I know the next 6 hours are going to hurt. Instinct. My body knew something my brain was still negotiating with. I almost turned around at the exit ramp. Almost. But I thought about that cornbread, and I thought about Dr. Kwan's voice, and I kept driving. The Belvedere sat at the end of a strip of shops I hadn't visited in years, the expensive side of town, the kind of place where the parking lot is landscaped, and the hostesses wear all black. Dad's truck was in the third row, Mom's sedan next to it. Fine. Then I saw Aunt Linda's white Buick, Uncle Greg's SUV, Brooke's hatchback with the bumper sticker from the cafe that had closed 11 months after it opened. 3 more cars I recognized. 2 I didn't. My stomach dropped before I even opened the door. Just the 4 of us. Mom had written. I counted 9 vehicles. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes. Engine off. Hands on the wheel. Reading that sticky note. One dinner. Then home. The smart thing would have been to reverse out of the lot and drive the 40 minutes back to my condo and eat leftover soup and never think about the Mayfield family reunion I hadn't been invited to, or apparently had been invited to without being told the guest list. But I got out. I straightened my blouse. I locked the car and walked toward the entrance because I was 32 years old and I'd spent 3 years learning how not to run. And I was not going to start running again in a restaurant parking lot on a Thursday evening. The front doors were heavy glass with brass handles, the kind that whisper. Entrees start at $42 before you even see a menu. Inside, the lobby smelled like rosemary and warm bread and money. A hostess in a black dress smiled and checked her screen. Mayfield? I nodded. She nodded back. Your party's already seated. She said it the way hostesses say things when they've been dealing with a large group for an hour and are trying very hard not to look stressed. I recognized the expression. I'd worn it myself 1,000 times. She grabbed a menu, just one, and led me toward the back of the dining room. I could hear them before I could see them. Laughter, clinking glasses, my Aunt Linda's unmistakable cackle cutting through the murmur of every other table. One dinner, then home. I turned the corner and saw the table, 16 chairs, every single one filled except the one at the far end. Directly across from my father, the table stretched the entire length of the private dining alcove. White linen, heavy silverware, candles in low crystal holders. There were platters I could identify from 10 feet away. Lobster tails fanned across crushed ice. Wagyu sliders on a tiered stand, a charcuterie board the size of a coffee table, and in the center, a bottle of wine I recognized from vendor tastings, a 2016 Saint-Emilion Grand Cru. Retail around $400. Already half empty. They'd been here a while. They'd been ordering hard. The hostess paused at the edge of the alcove and glanced at me with a look that translated perfectly across every restaurant I've ever worked in. Good luck. Then she leaned closer and said quietly, "Your father put a card down to hold the reservation. Just so you know, we require one for parties over 12. I filed that sentence the way I file every operational detail. Silently, completely, permanently. His card was on file. He'd secured the table. And yet, somehow I already knew the bill wasn't supposed to land on him. My mother saw me first. She stood up with both arms open, and every head at the table turned. "Diana! Oh, sweetheart! Look at you!" Applause. Actual applause. Like I was a returning soldier, and not the daughter they'd ghosted for 1,000 days. Uncle Greg whistled. Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin. Brooke raised her wine glass and smiled the kind of smile that has teeth but no warmth. 16 people, lobster, and wagyu, and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux. Just the four of us. Mom had written. I sat down. What else do you do when 16 people are watching you, and the chair is already pulled out, and a waiter is pouring water into your glass before your purse hits the floor? I sat down, and I smiled because that's what 15 years of front of house training gives you. The ability to smile while your brain is running threat assessment at full speed. Mom settled back into her seat, beaming. We wanted it to be a surprise. The whole family together, just like old times. I thought it was just the four of us. I said. Mom waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. Well, once Linda heard, and then Greg, and then your cousin Tara. It just grew. You know how family is. I knew exactly how family was. I scanned the table. Dad sat at the head, carving a wagyu slider like it was Thanksgiving turkey. Brooke sat to his left, phone in one hand, wine in the other, scrolling something I couldn't see. Aunt Linda and Uncle Greg anchored the middle. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since a Thanksgiving 5 years ago filled the rest. Tyler, Megan, Jake, 2 wives I'd met once, and Aunt Linda's neighbor, who I'd never seen before in my life, but who was apparently eating lobster on whatever occasion this was. The wine was flowing. The platters were half demolished. They'd been here at least an hour before I arrived, and they'd ordered everything on the menu that didn't require a second mortgage. Mom leaned across and squeezed my hand. See? Family takes care of family. There it was again. The same 5 words, delivered with the same warm packaging, aimed at the same target. I squeezed back and said nothing. I was counting plates. My father is the kind of man who orders for the table, not asks, orders. He waved the waiter over, a young guy barely out of his teens, who looked like he was running on caffeine and anxiety, and rattled off additions without glancing at a menu. Another round of the lobster tails, 2 more wagyu plates, and bring another bottle of that Bordeaux. The Grand Cru, the good one, he said, the good one, loud enough for the tables on either side of us to hear. Dad pulled his credit card from his wallet and held it between 2 fingers like a magician showing the audience a coin before the trick. Put it all on this, he told the waiter. We're celebrating tonight. The waiter, his name tag read Nathan, scribbled and nodded and disappeared toward the kitchen with the look of someone who desperately wanted a smoke break. I watched my father tuck the card back into his wallet with a little pat. The way you pat a dog that's performed well. Something was off. I'd grown up watching Dad argue over the price of a muffler. I'd seen him return a shirt because the sale tag was missing. Raymond Mayfield did not order $400 bottles of wine. He did not wave credit cards like flags. This was a performance, and it was aimed at me. Look how well we're doing. Diana, look how little we needed you. Except the car in the parking lot was the same truck from 5 years ago with a dent in the rear quarter panel he'd never fixed. And Mom's handbag, The Coach purse she'd carried since I was in high school sat on the chair beside her with a cracked strap held together by a safety pin. They were performing. I just didn't know the price of admission yet. The small cuts started around the second bottle. Aunt Linda leaned across Uncle Greg and said, "Must be nice running all those fancy restaurants while the rest of us clip coupons." She laughed when she said it, the way people laugh when they want you to know they're serious. Cousin Megan asked if I ever felt guilty living so well while my parents were going through a rough patch. I didn't know about a rough patch. Nobody had told me about a rough patch. Brooke, without looking up from her phone, added, "She wouldn't know. She hasn't been around." Each comment landed with the precision of something rehearsed. Not scripted exactly, but aligned, the way a choir finds the same note without a conductor. They'd been talking about me, about my absence, my money, my life, and they'd arrived tonight with a shared understanding of the story. Diana left. Diana has plenty. Diana owes. Aunt Linda delivered the thesis statement. She reached across the table, took my hand like she was comforting me at a funeral, and said, "Family doesn't keep score, dear." I almost laughed. Family doesn't keep score? This from a woman who once stopped speaking to her own daughter-in-law for 6 months over a Thanksgiving seating arrangement. I didn't laugh. I pulled my hand back gently and picked up my glass, sparkling water, the only thing in front of me, the only thing I'd ordered. The contrast was almost funny. 16 people swimming in Lobster and Bordeaux, and me with a glass of San Pellegrino sitting at the end of the table like a designated driver at a bachelor party. Nathan, the young waiter, passed behind me, and I caught his eye. "Just the water tonight?" he asked. "Quiet. Just the water," I said. He nodded like he understood something I hadn't said out loud. "Let me tell you about Nathan." He was maybe 19 or 20, built thin the way restaurant kids are before they learn to eat between rushes. He moved fast but careful, the way new servers do when the table is too big and the order is too complicated, and they know one wrong plate means a manager conversation they can't afford. I recognized everything about him because I'd been him, 17 years old, 2 tables deep, learning that the guests who snap their fingers are always the ones who tip the least. He was handling our 16 top alone. Well, almost alone. A busser appeared occasionally to clear plates, but Nathan was running every order, every refill, every "excuse me, can we get more butter?" from Aunt Linda, who'd said it 3 times in 20 minutes. He never complained. He never sighed. He refilled my sparkling water without being asked, and when he set the glass back down, he caught me watching the table with an expression I probably should have hidden better. "Long night?" he murmured. I almost told him the truth. Instead, I just said, "You're doing great." He blinked, startled, like he'd customers could say that. Then he straightened up about half an inch taller and moved on to Uncle Greg's refill. I watched him go and thought about the version of me that used to carry 4 plates up her forearm and cry in the walk-in freezer on the hard nights. That girl had no idea she'd end up on the other side of a table like this, sitting across from the family that made her into a fixer and a funder, being asked without being asked to write one more check. But she'd understand what I was about to do. She'd understand it perfectly. I excused myself to the restroom around the 40-minute mark. I needed 2 minutes without Aunt Linda's commentary, and a door I could lock. The Belvedere's restroom was the kind with cloth hand towels, and lavender soap, and a full-length mirror that made you look slightly better than you felt, which was a neat trick considering I felt like I was digesting glass. I turned on the faucet, pressed cold water against my wrists the way you do when you need your heart rate to cooperate with your brain. Then I saw it, a phone on the edge of the marble countertop, screen still lit, case covered in daisy stickers. Brooke's phone. She must have come in before me and left it when she got distracted. Brooke left things everywhere. It was one of the few traits we shared. I didn't plan to look. I want to be clear about that. But the screen was bright. And the notification banner at the top was from a group chat I'd never been added to. And the preview text was enough to stop my hand mid-reach for the paper towel. The group was called Dinner Plan. 3 members: Mom, Dad, Brooke. The latest message, sent 4 days ago, was from Mom. The preview showed the words I can still recite from memory. Don't tell Diana, it's everyone. She won't dare. The message cut off at the banner's edge. My pulse was steady. My hands were dry. I picked up the phone the way I'd pick up a vendor invoice that didn't add up. Not angry, not surprised, just confirming what the numbers already told me. I scrolled up. The full message read, "Don't tell Diana, it's everyone. Once she's there with the whole family watching, she won't dare say no. She never could handle a scene." Below it, Dad had replied, "Just make sure she sits at my end. I'll handle the ask." Brooke's contribution, time-stamped 2 minutes later. Order the good stuff before she gets there. Once it's on the table, she can't exactly send it back. LOL. I kept scrolling. 3 weeks of messages. Mom, coordinating RSVPs. Linda's in. Greg's in. Megan says, yes, if there's wine. Dad, quieter. Mostly logistical. Parking. Reservation time. How to frame the invitation so it sounded casual. Then the messages that turned my stomach cold. Mom, 10 days ago. The bank called again Thursday. We need to figure out something before June. Dad, Diana can cover us through spring. She's got more than enough. And the one that hit like a bag of gravel dropped from a shelf. Mom again. 8 days ago. It's not asking for money. It's letting her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even giving her this chance. Grateful. They wanted me to be grateful for the privilege of being tricked into a 16-person dinner at a restaurant I couldn't have picked for myself. So I could pay a bill I didn't order to solve a crisis nobody told me about for a family that cut me off when I said no the last time. I set Brooke's phone back on the counter. Screen down. Exactly where I found it. I washed my hands. I looked at myself in that flattering mirror. And I thought, I know what you're doing. I know what this costs. And for the first time in 15 years, I am not going to pay it. I stood in that bathroom, holding the truth in both hands. And the strangest part was how calm I felt. Not numb, not angry, just clear. The way a kitchen goes quiet right before a dinner rush. Everything in position, nothing wasted, every station ready. If you've ever found out you were loved for what you could provide, and not who you are, you know exactly how cold that tile floor felt under my shoes. Stay with me. Subscribe because what I did next. I planned in the time it takes to dry your hands. I walked back to the table with the same expression I wear when a health inspector arrives unannounced. Pleasant, unreadable, fully operational. Nobody noticed anything different. Aunt Linda was telling a story about her neighbor's divorce. Uncle Greg was working on his 3rd lobster tail. Brooke had reclaimed her phone from the restroom and was scrolling again, oblivious. But I noticed things now that I hadn't before or hadn't let myself see. Mom kept glancing at Dad's wallet on the table. Quick little flicks of her eyes like she was checking a countdown. Dad's laugh was half a beat too loud. The way people laugh when they're nervous. And covering it with volume. The wine bottle, the second one, was nearly empty. And nobody had suggested slowing down because why would they? They weren't paying. I was paying. That was the whole point of the evening. And every lobster tail, every Wagyu slider, every pour of that $400 Bordeaux was another brick in the wall they were building around me. High enough that I couldn't climb out without making the scene I'd spent my whole life avoiding. I started asking questions. Casual ones. The kind you ask when you're catching up after 3 years. And not the kind you ask when you already know the answers. And you're watching people lie. How's the cafe? Brooke? Brooke's wine glass paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, we closed. Market just wasn't there. She said fast, like pulling off a bandage she'd rehearsed removing. That's too bad. How long did it last? 11 months. Mom jumped in before the silence could settle. Brooke's exploring other options. She has so many talents. I nodded. Then I turned to Dad. How's the contracting business? Dad, still doing the commercial builds? Dad's jaw tightened for half a second. A tell I'd cataloged before I was old enough to drive. Between projects right now. Economy's been tough. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I knew because I just read the bank called again Thursday on his wife's phone 10 minutes ago. And because the dent in his truck was still there. And because the man who'd ordered 2 rounds of lobster and a $400 bottle of wine was sitting across from me, performing solvency the way a community theater actor performs Shakespeare, loud, committed, and entirely unconvincing to anyone who's seen the real thing. I just nodded and let them keep talking. People tell you everything when they think you're the bank. They told me about the kitchen renovation they'd put on hold, about the vacation they decided to skip this year, about how things have been a little tight, but nothing we can't handle. Every sentence was a window into a house I could now see was on fire, and they were all standing on the lawn pretending the smoke was barbecue. The pressure started building the way it always does in my family, not with a direct question, but with a current, little comments that pushed in the same direction, casual enough to deny, coordinated enough to corner. Aunt Linda sighed and said, "It must be so rewarding doing well for yourself like that. Some of us aren't so lucky." Cousin Tyler, who I hadn't spoken to since Obama's second term, chimed in with, "Yeah, Diana, you really landed on your feet. That's awesome." Even Uncle Greg, who normally communicates exclusively through sports metaphors, managed a, "You hit a home run out there, kid." Each compliment was a brick. Each brick pointed the same way. You have money. We see it, and we're reminding you in front of witnesses. Mom orchestrated from the center of the table, like a conductor who'd memorized the score. A nod to Linda, a smile at Tyler, a gentle hand on Dad's arm when he started to speak too soon. She was good. She'd always been good. I used to think my mother was just a warm person who liked hosting. Now I understood she was a project manager with a 20-year track record. And her biggest deliverable was sitting at the end of the table drinking sparkling water. The dessert menus arrived. Aunt Linda ordered creme brulee without looking at the price. Brooke asked for the chocolate souffle, which required a 20-minute lead time, which meant she'd ordered it before I sat down. Of course she had. They were running up the tab the way you run up a tab when someone else is paying, without a ceiling, without guilt, without a single glance at the column on the right side of the menu. My sparkling water was down to the ice. Brooke was the one who cracked the surface. Snorts, she'd had 3 glasses of the Bordeaux by then, enough to sand down whatever filter she normally kept between her brain and her mouth, which was never especially thick to begin with. She leaned across the table, glass in hand, and grinned at me like we were sharing a joke. "Relax, big sister. It's just dinner. You can afford it." I set my water down. "Afford what?" "This." She gestured at the table, the platters, the wine, the 16 place settings, the creme brulee, and chocolate souffle currently being prepared by a kitchen that had no idea it was catering a shakedown. "We ordered the good stuff since you're treating." She said it so casually. "Since you're treating?" Like it had been settled in a meeting I wasn't invited to, which of course it had been. The table went quiet for about 3 seconds, which doesn't sound long until you're the one sitting in it. Mom shot Brooke a look that said, "Too early." And Brooke shrugged like she'd bumped a vase she didn't plan to pick up. Uncle Greg studied his lobster. Aunt Linda suddenly found her napkin fascinating. Dad cleared his throat. The silence lasted long enough for Nathan to arrive with a fresh bottle of sparkling water and place it beside my glass, and for me to realize 2 things. First, that Nathan was the only person at this table who had poured me something without expecting anything in return. And second, that Brooke had just confirmed out loud what every single person in this room already knew. I was the mark. This whole dinner was a heist, and every lobster tail was evidence. What happened next was an accident, and I almost felt bad for Cousin Megan when it landed. She was trying to make conversation. Genuinely, I think. Because Megan was the one family member who'd sent me a birthday text during year 2 of the silence. A short thinking of you that I'd never replied to, and still felt guilty about. So, Diana, Mom, said you got a big promotion. Something about running a bunch of restaurants now. I kept it simple. Regional Operations Director. For locations. Megan nodded. Impressed. That's amazing. Like, you're in charge of all of them. Staffing, vendors, compliance, financials, everything from the loading dock to the check. I said it the way I'd say it in a meeting. Factual, no polish, but the word financials landed on that table like a rock through a window. Aunt Linda's fork stopped. Uncle Greg looked up from his plate for the first time in 10 minutes. Brooke's scrolling thumb froze. Even Dad shifted in his chair, reweighting, recalculating. They knew I was successful. They'd built their entire evening around the assumption that I was successful enough to pay. But hearing it, the scope, the authority, the specificity of what I actually did, was different from assuming it. They'd pictured me as a well-paid waitress who'd gotten lucky. They hadn't pictured someone who could read a PL statement faster than they could read a menu, who managed vendor contracts worth more than their house, who knew exactly, down to the cent, what 16 lobster tails and 2 bottles of Grand Cru Bordeaux cost before the check ever arrived. The table recalibrated. I could feel it happening, like a change in barometric pressure. The power hadn't shifted yet, but it had loosened. Dad waited until dessert. He was strategic about it. I'll give him that. The soufflé had arrived. The crème brûlée was cracked. And the second bottle of Bordeaux was upside down in the ice bucket. The table was warm and full and slow with sugar and wine. And every face was soft with the particular satisfaction that comes from a meal you didn't pay for and don't intend to. Dad set down his fork. He folded his hands on the edge of the table, a gesture I'd seen him make before signing contracts, before delivering speeches at Thanksgiving, before telling me at 23 that he needed a co-signer just this once. He looked at me, not unkindly, not cruelly, with the particular expression of a man who believes he's being reasonable. Diana, he smiled. You're paying, right? You owe us that much. 5 words. You owe us that much. 16 people heard them. Nathan, refilling Aunt Linda's coffee behind me, heard them. The couple at the next table, pretending not to listen, heard them. My mother nodded. My sister smirked. My aunt reached for another pat of butter like the matter was settled. You owe us. 3 years of silence. And not one person at that table had said they were sorry, or that they'd been wrong, or that they'd missed me for any reason other than my credit limit. You owe us that much. I looked at my father across a table, covered in the wreckage of a meal I hadn't ordered, surrounded by a family I hadn't been told was coming, holding a glass of water I'd poured myself. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Because the decision I'd been afraid to make had just been made for me. I didn't answer right away. I've learned that silence does more work than words in a room full of people who are used to being agreed with. 3 seconds. 5. The kind of silence that makes a table of 16 people shift in their chairs and reach for their water glasses. And suddenly remember they have something interesting to look at on the wall behind you. For 15 years, I'd paid so no one would make a scene. I'd picked up every check, co-signed every loan, covered every deposit, and every dental bill, and every florist invoice. Because the cost of saying no was a room exactly like this one, full of staring, expecting faces, full of the unspoken understanding that Diana's love was measured in dollars, and Diana's silence was purchased with compliance. 15 years, thousands of dollars, And the price of admission to my own family had just been announced to the room at roughly $80 a plate. Plus wine, plus lobster, plus the particular tax that comes with being the child they only call when something needs funding. I looked at my father's hands, still folded, still steady. I looked at my mother's eyes, still warm, still performing. I looked at Brooke, who was already scrolling again, because as far as she was concerned, this was decided. I looked at Nathan, standing by the service station, watching with the careful attention of a young man who knows something important is happening at his table, but isn't sure what. Then I looked at my sparkling water, half full, catching the candlelight like a small, quiet promise I'd made to myself. I put my napkin on the table. I smiled. Let me go take care of things, I said, and stood up. Mom exhaled. Aunt Linda patted her chest. Dad unfolded his hands. Every single one of them thought, here's the thing. 15 years behind a host stand teaches you. The person who controls the check controls the room. My family thought they controlled it. They'd set the table, chosen the restaurant, ordered the menu, assembled the audience, and delivered the demand. They had 16 people, 2 bottles of wine, and 3 years of built-up pressure on their side. I had 2 sentences, and a waiter named Nathan. If a quiet boundary has ever changed your whole life, if you've ever walked into a room where everyone expected you to fold, and you didn't, hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this one lands. I didn't walk toward the front register. I walked toward the service station at the back of the dining room where Nathan was organizing check presenters, and a floor manager named David was reviewing a ticket. David wore the standard uniform, black shirt, black tie, earpiece, and he had the look of a man who'd been in the industry long enough to handle whatever walked up to him. I walked up to him. Excuse me, David? He turned. Professional smile. How can I help? I kept my voice low. Not dramatic, not conspiratorial, just the volume you use in the industry when you're handling something that doesn't need the dining room's attention. Nathan was beside him, listening, eyes alert, tray balanced on his hip. Both of them looked at me the way restaurant professionals look at someone who speaks their language. With immediate, precise attention, I said 2 sentences. I'm not the host, and I won't be covering this table tonight. Please bring the full check to the gentleman at the head of the table, the one whose card is already on file for the reservation. David blinked once. He glanced at Nathan, then back at me. And the second thing, split off just my sparkling water onto a separate check and add 30% to mine for your team. You've earned it tonight. Nathan's eyes widened slightly. David looked at me for 3 full seconds, reading the situation the way a good floor manager reads every situation. Fast, thorough, without judgment. Then he nodded. Done. That was it. No argument. No hesitation. No, are you sure? Nang. Because David had been doing this long enough to know what a redirect looked like. And Nathan had been watching that table long enough to understand why one was needed. I paid my check on the spot. 1 sparkling water, 2 refills, plus a 30% tip that would be the largest Nathan had received in a month. David ran my card, handed me the receipt, and said quietly, I'll present the table's check in about 10 minutes, once the dessert course clears. Perfect. I walked back to the table, sat down, picked up my water, and took a slow sip. Brooke was arguing with Cousin Tyler about a reality show. Aunt Linda was telling Uncle Greg about her neighbor's fence dispute. Mom was watching me with the careful attention of someone who thinks the check has been handled. Dad was leaning back, arms crossed, satisfied. 16 people eating dessert, drinking the last of a $400 bottle of wine, waiting for a bill they had no intention of seeing. I set my glass down and waited with them. Those 10 minutes were the most peaceful of my evening. The table didn't know it yet, but the meal was over in every way that mattered. The food was eaten. The wine was gone. The ask had been made. And the answer had already been delivered in a language none of them spoke. Isedaman, and listened to my family talk. Aunt Linda complained about the cost of mulch. Uncle Greg told a fishing story that had no ending. Brooke took a selfie with the suet play remnants. Mom laughed at something Cousin Megan said. A real laugh, the kind that crinkled her eyes and made her sound for exactly 3 seconds like the woman who used to sing Dolly Parton in the kitchen. I almost felt something. Almost. But then I looked at Dad, who was checking his phone under the table with the tight-jawed focus of a man waiting for a text he didn't want to receive. And I remembered the message I'd read on Brooke's phone. Diana can cover us through spring. She's got more than enough. My sparkling water caught the candlelight again. I watched the bubbles rise and pop, one by one, each one a tiny implosion that nobody noticed. I thought about 17-year-old Diana in her apron, carrying 4 plates up her forearm, learning to smile through the burning in her shoulders. That girl would have paid. That girl would have pulled out her card and covered the whole table and called it love and gone home and cried in the shower and never told anyone. I wasn't that girl anymore. Nathan appeared at the edge of the alcove, and I knew, before he took his first step, exactly whose chair he was walking toward. Nathan placed the check presenter, leather-bound, embossed with the Belvedere's logo, directly in front of my father, not in the center of the table, not near me, in front of Raymond Mayfield, the man who'd made the reservation, whose card was on file, who'd told the table to put it all on this 2 hours ago. The table conversation died like a candle in a draft. Dad stared at the leather folio for 2 seconds. I could see him processing. The check was supposed to go to Diana. The check was supposed to go to Diana. The check is in front of me. Mom's eyes went wide. She looked at me, then at the check, then at me again. And for the first time all night, her composure cracked enough to show the math running behind it. Diana, she started. Dad recovered first. He was good at recovering. He'd spent 63 years, never admitting he was caught off guard. He picked up the check presenter, opened it with a casual flick, and did not look at the total. He couldn't look at the total. If he looked at the total in front of 16 people, the performance would end. I've got it, he said, pulling his credit card from his wallet with the same 2-finger flourish he'd used earlier. Snorts! He handed the card to Nathan without breaking eye contact with me. We're celebrating. Remember. Nathan took the card. I'll be right back. Sir. He said it gently. The way you say things when you know what's about to happen, and the person you're talking to doesn't. Dad leaned back, crossed his arms, smiled at me with the full confidence of a man who believed his card would save him. Nathan came back in 4 minutes. He stood beside my father's chair. He leaned down and said, at a volume designed to be discreet, but heard by a table that had gone silent enough to hear ice melt. I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined. Nobody moved. Dad's smile held for 1 more second, a reflex, like a light that stays on after you flip the switch. Then it went out. Run it again, he said. Nathan nodded. He disappeared. He came back in 2 minutes. Same lean, same gentle voice. I'm sorry, sir. It's still not going through. Would you like to try another card? Dad reached for his wallet. His fingers moved through the slots. 1 card, then another, then a third he pulled from behind his driver's license, like a last bullet in a chamber he'd forgotten he loaded. He handed it to Nathan. The table was silent. 16 people. No forks moving. No wine being poured. No laughter. Just the sound of Raymond Mayfield's 63 years of pride compressing into a wallet he couldn't close fast enough. Nathan came back a 3rd time. He didn't need to speak. His face said it. Dad looked at Nathan. Then he looked at me. Not with anger. Not yet. With the raw, unguarded expression of a man who has just realized in front of every person who matters to him that the net he'd been counting on was gone, and the ground was exactly as hard as he'd always feared. He looked at me the way you look at a lifeboat that's pulling away from the ship. I picked up my sparkling water, took a sip, set it down. I don't know you. I never did. Dad's chair scraped back against the hardwood with a sound like tearing paper. Diana. His voice was low, controlled, shaking at the edges. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Dad, your card was declined. That's between you and your bank. You were supposed to. He stopped himself, but not fast enough. The sentence hung in the air, unfinished, visible to everyone. You were supposed to pay. Mom started crying. Not the quiet kind, the performative kind, the kind with gasps and dabbing, and enough volume to recruit sympathy from adjacent tables. After everything we've done for you, after I carried you, how could you sit there? And what did you do for me? Mom. My voice was level. I didn't raise it. I didn't lean forward. I stayed in my chair with my hands around my water glass. Tell me, in front of everyone, what did you do for me in the last 3 years? Brooke slammed her hand on the table. This is so typical. You always have to make everything about you. Aunt Linda reached for my arm. Diana, dear, your father is clearly embarrassed. Can't you just know? One word. I said it the way I'd say it to a vendor who tried to short my invoice. Clear, final, and without apology. Then Dad broke. Not with anger this time, with something worse. His voice dropped, and for one moment, one terrible, honest moment, he sounded like a man standing in a house with the lights turned off. Diana, please, we're drowning. I saw him. I saw the scared man behind the performance, the father who'd lost his business, and his pride, and couldn't say it out loud until his credit card said it for him. I saw him, and I ached. Then he added, and you'd let us. And the ache stopped, because, even drowning, he was still reaching for my wallet instead of my hand. I stood up, not fast, not dramatic, the way you stand when you've made your decision, and you don't need the room's permission to leave. Dad, I'm sorry you're struggling. I mean that. But this, I gestured at the table, the empty platters, the upside-down wine bottles, the 16 faces watching me like I was the villain in a story they'd rehearsed all week. This isn't asking for help. This is a trap. You didn't invite me to make amends. You invited me to make a payment. Mom's crying shifted into something harder. That's not fair. Diana, we just wanted you back. You wanted me back for what I could cover. Mom, I read the messages. She can cover us through spring. The table went white. Brooke's face drained. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad looked at the tablecloth. If you need help, real help, I will sit down with you and a financial counselor, and we will figure out a plan. No tricks, no audience, no lobster. But I'm not paying this bill. I didn't order it. I wasn't told about it. And I don't owe it to you. I don't know you. I never did. Nobody spoke. I picked up my purse. I looked at my mother, and I said the last thing I would say to her at that table. You always told me family takes care of family. So why was I the only one who ever did? Then I walked toward the door, past the busser, past the hostess, past the heavy glass doors with the brass handles. Nathan caught me near the coat check. Ma'am? He was holding my receipt. Thank you, he said, quiet, sincere. I touched his shoulder. You're doing great. I told him again. Then I walked out. The parking lot was quiet. Thursday evening. Warm air. Cicadas starting up in the landscape trees that made the Belvedere look like it belonged somewhere more important than a strip mall. I sat in my car with the engine off and the window down and read the sticky note still pressed to my steering wheel. One dinner, then home. One dinner. I pulled my phone from my purse and opened the family group chat. The messages were already flooding in. Mom, Aunt Linda, Brooke, cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all of them typing at once, a cascade of exclamation points and accusations, and the particular kind of fury that only comes from people who've been caught. I didn't read them. I scrolled to the bottom, tapped Leave Group, and watched the notification confirm it. Diana has left the chat. I set the phone on the passenger seat. I started the engine. And I drove home in the same silence I'd driven there. Except this time the silence wasn't nervous. It was mine. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. No one called that night, or the next day, or the day after that. The group chat I'd left continued without me. I know because Cousin Megan, the one who'd sent the birthday text, reached out separately a week later. "I just wanted you to know," she wrote. "That was the most honest thing anyone's done at a family dinner in 20 years. I'm sorry I was part of it." Megan was the only one who apologized. 3 weeks later, Brooke texted, not to apologize, to ask if I could lend her first, and last month's rent for a new apartment. I replied with the name of a financial counseling service and wished her well. She didn't respond. Through Megan, I learned the rest in pieces over the following months. Dad's contracting business had folded 18 months before the dinner. Bad bets on 2 commercial projects that went sideways. Mom had been covering minimums on 4 credit cards with a home equity line that was now maxed. The house went on the market in July. They moved to a smaller rental in a town 30 minutes south. Brooke took a job at a dentist's office, answering phones. None of it was what I wanted for them. All of it was the consequence of choices they'd made long before I walked into the Belvedere. And none of it was mine to fix. I did what I'd promised at the table. I called Dad 6 weeks later and offered to sit with him and a financial counselor. He hung up. I haven't called again, but the offer still stands. I learned that the most expensive thing you can buy is other people's comfort with your silence. And the night I stopped paying for it was the night I finally got rich. That's my story. 16 seats, 1 glass of water, and a credit card that told the truth nobody else would. If you've ever been the family bank, hear me. Helping is a choice, not a debt. And a boundary doesn't have to be loud to be unbreakable. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Next. Let me tell you the second compelling story. My mother loves taking petty advantages and is incapable of understanding simple instructions. My mother takes pettiness to the extreme and simply cannot comprehend human speech. On a trip to Thailand, I warned and pleaded with her 1,000 times. The complimentary drinks with green leaves in the hotel must not be consumed or brought back to the country. The next thing I knew, to save money on a pot of flower tea, she poured that leafy drink into my thermos. On the day of our return, I was taken away to operate a sewing machine, prison labor, for half a year. When I confronted her, my father and sister said she was just frugal by habit and didn't do it on purpose. Because of that sewing machine stint, my chances of getting into college and my career were ruined. One day, my mother was busy lining up at the supermarket for discounted eggs and sent me to an old man's house to collect empty bottles and cardboard. In the pitch darkness, the drunk old man mistook me for my mother, tried to grope me, and when I struggled, he knocked me out and assaulted me. I wanted to call the police, but my mother, fearing exposure of her dealings with the old man, forbade it. She then turned around and accepted 50,000 yuan in compensation from the old man, forcing me to marry him. My sister even said the old man was on welfare. Unable to bear the humiliation, I jumped from the 10th floor. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hotel bed in Thailand. This time, I must let my mother's toxic piss splash all over my father and sister, making them scream. In the middle of the night, I instinctively took a sip from my thermos, noticed the taste was off, and immediately rushed to the bathroom to induce vomiting. In my past life, it was because of this taste that I spent half a year operating the sewing machine. When I found that drink bottle with the green leaves in the trash, I confirmed I had been reborn. Before coming to Thailand, I had done my research. I warned my mother 1,000 times. That free drink with the green leaves contains marijuana if caught with it back home. You'll be sent to operate the sewing machine. As a result, she thought my flower tea was too expensive, poured it into my thermos, and I was sent away for half a year. I endured that half year, then came home to confront her. How many times did I warn you not to drink that free stuff? Why didn't you listen? Now my education and career are ruined because of you. Are you happy now? My mother hid behind my father with an innocent look. I smelled that drink, and it was more fragrant than your flower tea. I thought you'd definitely like it. Furious, I cursed her. Stop pretending to be kind. The next second, my sister slapped me across the face. Don't be so ungrateful. My father also yelled at me. We supported your education for so many years, and it all went to the dogs. I studied day and night, only to receive rejection email after rejection email, and rejection call after rejection call. Gradually, I fell into depression, losing all will to think about studying or work. My mother got to know a local wealthy old man through collecting bottles and cardboard in the neighborhood. He would call my mother every time he had empty bottles, oil drums, or cardboard, and would also take the chance to cop a feel. One day, my mother was busy lining up for discounted eggs at the supermarket and sent me to the old man's house to pick up bottles and cardboard. The old man was drunk, in the dark. He mistook me for my mother, tried to take liberties. I struggled to refuse, and he knocked me out and raped me. I wanted to call the police. My mother, afraid the old man would stop giving her plastic bottles and cardboard, and even more afraid that her borderline affair with him would be exposed, cried, made a scene at home, knelt down, and kowtowed, begging me not to call the police. What made my heart turn cold was that my father also said not to call the police, saying it would be a disgrace. That night, my mother extorted 50,000 yuan in compensation from the old man. She then happily used that money to buy my sister a house. My sister slapped me with the compensation money. Idiot, you might as well marry that old man. He has a house and welfare, even if he is bald with dribbling urine. Unable to bear the humiliation, I leaped from the 10th floor, reborn once more. I silently poured out the drink in my thermos and went back to sleep. This time, I want to see how my mother's shit-smeared spear stabs each of them to death. Since tap water in Thailand isn't safe to drink even when boiled, I asked the hotel staff for bottled mineral water. My mother started her usual nagging. Tap water is fine once boiled. You are so pretentious. You even have to buy mineral water to drink. I couldn't be bothered to argue. Seeing me buy mineral water, she stopped boiling tap water herself. Before returning home, she packed a large bag of empty mineral water bottles, saying she wanted to sell them for money back home. I only got her to put them down after offering to pay for the excess baggage fees. When I was young, I thought my mother's frugality was a fine quality. Growing up, I only felt her extreme frugality was creating hardship where there is none. Penny wise and pound foolish, she was reluctant to turn on the AC in summer and would go out in the blazing sun to pick up plastic bottles and cardboard, ending up with heat stroke and a 1,000 yuan hospital bill. She was reluctant to throw away leftovers and reluctant to turn on the fridge, resulting in acute gastroenteritis and a 3,000 yuan hospital stay. She kept every shopping bag, clean or not, stuffing them into the gaps of the fridge, saying to save them for next time, but she never actually used them until the fridge had heat dissipation problems, costing over 1,000 to repair. She would pick used tissues out of the trash can to wipe bottoms. She did the same with my used face towels, secretly picking them up, drying them, and folding them back into the face towel box for me to reuse. Even with a cold and a runny nose, she would skimp on tissue, wiping her nose with her hand, and then smearing it on the sofa cushion. Mom, who are you grossing out by smearing snot on the sofa cushion. My mother turned around and complained to my father I was just trying to save some paper. She also accused me, unlike you, who uses 3 sheets of paper to wipe your butt. No matter how rich the family is, we can't afford your waste. My father immediately yelled at me, "Your mother has only wiped once or twice. Just wash the sofa cushion if it gets dirty. Why are you scolding her? Also, using 3 sheets of paper per toilet visit is indeed a bit much." I didn't retort, just quietly waiting for a chance to retaliate. I got hired by a local state-owned enterprise as a technical service provider. On my first day at work, I received a call from the police station. It wasn't until I got to the station that I found out my mother had stolen cardboard boxes that another old lady in the neighborhood had neatly collected. The old lady called the police and got her arrested. I told you countless times not to pick up trash, that the family doesn't need that 3 or 5 yuan, but you wouldn't listen. Now, a 500 yuan fine. Are you happy now? The police station only accepted cash. I pretended I had no cash on me. My mother paid the 500 yuan fine herself. Heartbroken over the 500 yuan, she came home creating a scene, threatening suicide, and cursing me for being unfilial when I wouldn't transfer her the money. I had witnessed this behavior countless times and saw through her act of appearing weak to manipulate everyone. The family doesn't need the money from selling scraps. Just stay home comfortably with the AC on, or go square dancing. Can you please stop causing trouble? My mother refused to admit fault. I just wanted to make things easier for you. I was speechless. Then just pick up legitimate stuff. Why steal from others? Mom, their door wasn't even closed. Why couldn't I go in and take it? So angry, I wanted to slap her, if it was okay to take. Why did the police arrest you? Why did they fine you? My mother remembered the 500 yuan fine and started her suicidal theatrics again. My father and sister came home, saw my mother throwing a tantrum on the floor, and without asking why, each slapped me once. Father, did you make your mother angry again? Sister, a master's degree graduate, and all that education went to the dogs. You don't even understand basic filial piety towards the elderly. I had wanted to slap them back, one for each. In the end, I held back. I changed from anger to kneeling down in front of my mother with a plop. Mom, I was wrong. You picking bottles and cardboard is all for our own good. I wrongly blamed you. I immediately transferred 1,000 yuan to my mother, and she finally smiled. My sister washed grapes for my mother and fed them to her mouth. Mom is the most frugal and best mother in the world. I immediately chimed in. Ah, yes, exactly. I thought to myself, I hope when your mother is frugal and ignores your words, you can say that sentence too. The state-owned enterprise often required overtime, and I sometimes had to bring work home. I had just sat down in my study when my mother barged in without knocking, asking what we were eating for dinner. I said, "Whatever is at home is fine. I have a meeting. Don't come in again." She went out, but 3 minutes later pushed the door open again. "Can we just reheat last night's leftover half fish and not cook new dishes?" I said, "Fine." 2 minutes later, she pushed the door open again. "That leftover half fish might not be enough for 4 people. Is it okay if I add some chili to stretch it?" I held back my temper. "Fine." Less than 2 minutes later, she was back. "Since we are eating fish, should I reheat last night's leftover noodles and half bowl of shredded potatoes and bring them to you?" Finally, I couldn't suppress my anger. "I'm not eating. You guys eat by yourselves." I locked the door. Outside, I heard my mother sobbing. The daughter has grown up and despises her mother. She even locks the door. My mother's crying disturbed my sister's phone call with her boyfriend. "Chin XAN, how dare you lock your mother out? You are rebelling." My father, whose audiobook was interrupted, came over and kicked the door. Chin Exen, why did you lock your mother out? I steeled myself, opened the door, and put on a smiling face. Mom, I'm sorry. I'll eat whatever you make. I transferred another 200 yuan as a tomorrow's grocery money red packet. Finally, my mother smiled again when I finished my meeting and came out. That leftover half bowl of noodles and a few potato shreds were still waiting for me. I turned back to my room to get my phone. Colleagues invited me to dinner. I'm heading out. My mother immediately chased after me. Who's treating? I looked down to change shoes, not sure. Hearing it might be my treat. My mother started her usual routine of fake crying. Sigh, my cooking isn't good enough. My daughter won't even eat at home. My father cursed and swore, but didn't dare stop me, as my salary was not lower than his. My sister chimed in. Chin Xan, a random cup of coffee outside costs 50 or 60 yuan. Can't you save a bit? Mother, 50 or 60. 50 or 60 is enough to buy 10 pounds of discounted pork. I closed the door and left, wishing their family a lifetime of loving harmony. I knew my wish wouldn't come true, because my mother wasn't just stingy with me and deaf to my words. She was stingy with everyone and deaf to everyone's words. I wanted to see how my mother would pinch my sister and father to death with her stinginess. That night, my father and sister came to borrow my printer, so I vacated the room for them. After dinner, a colleague called about work, so I went to the corridor to answer. As soon as I picked up, I saw my mother sneaking into my room. I guessed there would definitely be trouble. Sure enough, after entering the study, she started banging around, cleaning my desk. Seeing 2 stacks of documents on my table, she didn't think twice, tore them all to shreds, and stuffed them into her garbage cardboard box. When I finished the call and came back, the table was empty, and the cardboard box was full. I yelled, Mom, you touched my desk again. My mother shrank toward the door. I saw you were too busy to tidy up, so I helped you clean up. She immediately rummaged through the cardboard box, pulling out all the shredded paper. Look, it's all waste paper. I only threw it away because it was waste. I deliberately yelled loudly. I told you 1,000 times. This paper isn't worth much. Why just don't you listen? My mother, even if it's not worth much, it's still money. Many a mickle makes a muckle. Selling it for 3 or 5 yuan is still good. She started wiping tears again. Do you think your mother is stingy and miserly? My sister came out of the shower, pointed at me, and cursed. Chin Xan, you are truly an ungrateful lazybones. If it weren't for Mom tidying up here, and there for you every day, your room would probably be a pigsty. My mother felt even more justified. Tidying up this paper adds up. It really can be sold for money. My father hugged his phone, listening to novels. Chin Xan, you should learn from your mother how to be frugal and manage a household. Itura, and crumpled the stack of papers in my hand into a ball and threw it into the trash can. Right, it's just a pile of waste paper. Mom, it's all yours. Take it and sell it. I took out my briefcase from under the bed, watching them with a smile. I just hope you don't scream when you can't find the documents later. My father was frozen in place. My sister seemed to be struck by acupuncture, unable to move for a long time. My father was the first to react, immediately rummaging through the trash can. He pulled out a dozen shredded pieces of paper. Seeing the large red official seals on them, he flew into a rage. Pointing at my mother, he cursed a torrent of abuse. Do you have nothing better to do all day? Are you idle? My sister looked at her shredded stamped files. So angry, she almost pushed my mother to the ground. Can't you just stay quiet and behave for one day? Are you trying to die? I hugged my phone and scrolled through news, feeling ecstatic. On the day my sister got hired as a primary school teacher, my mother proposed spending my money to go to Thailand again, saying the drinks and fruits in Thai hotels were cheap and could be eaten and taken for free. Remembering my tragic experience in the previous life, I looked at my mother, deaf to reason, and stingy, and gritted my teeth and nodded. Okay, I didn't enjoy myself last time either. I specifically took annual leave early and went to Thailand with them again. This time, when my mother drank the boiled tap water to save money, I didn't stop her. After she drank the water, I pretended to take a work call and left the hotel at midnight when my mother was crying in pain from a stomach ache and sent to the hospital. I stayed next door, secretly laughing. Early the next morning, when my father smoked in the hotel entrance's non-smoking zone, I didn't stop him either. When the hotel manager fined him, I ran faster than a rabbit. My sister and mother both loved durian and mangosteen. They bought 3 durians and 10 pounds of mangosteen into the hotel. I didn't stop them either. When they were kicked out by the hotel staff, I almost burst out laughing with the experience from last time. This time in Thailand, I only drank purchased mineral water. When packing, my mother's claws finally reached for those free drinks with green leaves. Too bad you're dad, and I can't drink it because of high blood sugar. I heard from the local guide that these drinks are very tasty and refreshing. Your sister is a teacher now. It's taxing on the brain. Since it's free, I'll bring her a couple more bottles. I immediately gave her a thumbs up in agreement. Mom, you really know how to manage a household. Sure enough, we had trouble at the domestic security check upon returning. My sister was detained. My sister angrily questioned me. Did you tamper with my suitcase? I looked innocent. Don't wrong me. You never let me into your room. I never touched your suitcase. My sister roared like a maniac. If not you, then who? It must be you. You are jealous that I got a teaching job with winter and summer vacations, and it's a permanent position. It must be you. There's no one else. I pointed at my mother. Last night, I heard Mom say the drink was free and refreshing, and that you were about to become a teacher, so she wanted to prepare a few bottles for you. My mother, seeing the situation blow up, slapped her thigh and started crying loudly. I thought it was free, so why not take it? I didn't know this drink couldn't be brought back to the country. I was doing it for your own good. My sister didn't listen to my mother's explanation at all, angrily tackled my mother, and tried to strangle her neck. Why did you touch my things? You treat free stuff as treasure. You old hag. Why don't you just die? I immediately pulled my sister away. Sister, how can you curse Mom to die? You really are an ungrateful white-eyed wolf. All those years of schooling went to the dogs, didn't they? It's just operating a sewing machine for half a year. You can endure it and get through it. Mom also felt sorry for you, afraid you'd be too tired as a teacher, so she kindly prepared it for you. You need to appreciate her, the old lady. You said it yourself last time. Mom is the best mother in the world. My sister collapsed in tears, while I was happier than winning a 3,000 yuan lottery. This time, my mother seemed to finally realize she had done wrong. She cried and slapped herself. Eldest daughter, it was Mom who harmed you. I pretended to comfort her while fanning the flames. It's not a big deal. It just means sister can never be a teacher anymore. My father comforted my sister. Trust Dad. I'll use connections and money. I will absolutely not let you have a criminal record. Dad guarantees he'll get you into the best school. Sure enough, my sister stopped crying and obediently left with the police. That day when I got home, my father and mother were discussing how to host a certain high-ranking official for a banquet. I wanted to go back to my room, but my mother stopped me Can't you care about your sister? I eagerly joined in to offer advice. When my mother mentioned giving the official a large red envelope, I immediately agreed, praising my mother for being smart and savvy. My father handed the bank card to my mother. Here is 100,000 yuan. The gift giving is entrusted to you. Don't be stingy, be generous, but be discreet. Officials nowadays are wary of bribery. The next day, we went to see my sister at the detention center. My father received a call midway saying he had to meet a friend, so he let me accompany my mother to see my sister. I thought my sister would be depressed or insane, but surprisingly, she showed no signs of being locked up. She looked like she was on vacation. Seeing my sister wasn't angry with her. My mother, without avoiding the monitor, said my father had already figured out a way to save her. She said they were hosting a banquet for a leader in 2 days, and the gifts were already prepared. My sister nodded in satisfaction upon hearing this. My mother, Mom will definitely save you. Your dad knows many high-ranking officials here. And those high-ranking officials, your dad invites them to dinner, and they never refuse. In this world, who doesn't love money? I secretly glanced at the monitor's expression, holding back my laughter. See, even without my help, they can play themselves to death on the road to ruin. Watching them indulge in their beautiful dream, I kindly refrained from disturbing them. On the third day, as I expected, my father finally hosted the banquet for the official. To show sincerity, my father specifically invited the official to a fancy hotel restaurant. Seeing my mother was slick and reasonable, my father brought her along. As for me, since my job was relatively decent, and more importantly, to have me act as a wine pourer to please the official, he brought me along too. But when the dishes were served, my father, the official, and I were all dumbfounded. My mother only ordered 3 cheap dishes from the hotel. Everything else she brought from home, cooked, and packed in plastic bags, without a single plate. It was as tacky as it could get. The official was a dignified person, and didn't say much, just ate a few bites with a smile, and put down his chopsticks. Seeing the official's expression was off, my mother immediately took out 10 stacks of cash from her canvas bag and slapped them on the table. The official's face turned pale with fright at the sight of the money. My father's face turned pale with panic at the sight of the denominations. My mother was completely unaware of the problem and boasted, "Official, our eldest daughter's matter is in your hands. As long as you can get my daughter out, money is no object. Also, after our daughter gets out, put in a good word for her with the education department. Make sure she gets into the best school, preferably becoming an outstanding teacher directly." Seeing the official's ugly expression and refusal to take the money, my mother desperately tried to stuff it into his arms. Afraid of getting implicated, I pretended to take a call and left. Shortly after I left, the private room door was pushed open. When uniformed officers walked in with IDs, the high-ranking official was so angry he couldn't speak, trembling all over. Later, that official, my father, and my mother were all taken away for questioning and statements. That night, my father was beaten until his face was swollen by people sent by that official, and his head was split open. My father returned home in a fit of rage, smashing everything in the house that could be smashed. Finally, he pointed a rolling pin at my mother. "Are you incapable of understanding human speech? Or is there something wrong with your brain? Didn't I tell you to be discreet? And I told you to be generous. Generous. Where did your generosity go? Other people give gifts 100 at a time. 10,000 per stack. Why did you give 10 yuan bills? 100 per stack." My father was fuming, his hand holding the rolling pin shaking uncontrollably. The rolling pin slammed on the dining table in front of my mother, banging loudly. "I told you to be discreet. Discreet. You are stingy, and on top of that, you are deaf and brain damaged. Do you know how many connections I pulled to get this meal with this official? I even gave away several heavy gold chains. Now, he's under investigation. My daughter's matter is hopeless, and I've been fired from the company. We are all finished. My father kicked over the sofa in anger, the rolling pin smashing wildly against the sofa armrest. Still not satisfied, he almost hit my mother's head with the rolling pin. You've drilled yourself into money. You can't understand human speech. Can you? My mother was nearly staggered by my father's anger, but luckily I caught her in time. Dad, don't blame Mom. She definitely didn't do it on purpose. My mother immediately became aggrieved. I was very discreet. I even found a special wine tote bag to put the money in. No one could tell. I immediately added, yes, I didn't even know Mom hid the money in the tote bag. My father regretfully hit his own head. If I had known you were so unreliable, I would have been blind to ask you. My mother was even more aggrieved. I worked hard to handle things for you, and now that things have fallen through, it's all my fault. You are angry. Well, I am angry too. Who told you to ask me? To exchange for small bills. I ran to the bank 3 times. My legs got thinner. Watching my father turn purple with rage, my heart bloomed with joy. Dad, you have to appreciate Mom's hard work. I deliberately said, blame sister for being lazy and letting Mom pack her luggage. If she had packed her own luggage, this might not have happened. My father got even angrier, pointing the finger back at my mother. The first time we went traveling, I told Exiner not to drink that free drink with green leaves. Why just don't you listen? My mother cried into my arms, looking as aggrieved as possible. Seeing my father never came over to comfort her, she cried and threatened to hang herself. Old Cheen, are you trying to make me die? My father, driven crazy by my mother's crying, kicked a stool at me. You were with your mother all day. Why didn't you watch her? See, the buck passing starts again. Useless coward. At night, before my mother took a shower, I fiddled with the hair dryer she had picked up from the trash. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, I heard my mother's trembling scream, Old Cheen, save me. My father ran over when he heard the commotion, and a trembling scream was also heard. Exiner, quick, save us. See, my chance for revenge has arrived. I hid my successful, wicked smile, took the rolling pin, and headed toward them. Under their hopeful gazes, I gave each of them a whack, as ruthless as could be. My mother and father's arms were bruised and swollen on the spot, but they didn't dare make a peep. Watching them collapse straight to the floor, their faces contorted in pain, their muscles twitching and cramping, I felt unspeakable satisfaction. I ran to cut the power, furiously unplugged the hairdryer, and threw it at my mother. You deserve to be electrocuted to death. Which family throws away a perfectly good hairdryer? Is the thrower a fool? Or is the picker a fool? If I hadn't been home today, you and Dad would have been electrocuted to death, and no one would have known. My father was also half dead with anger, cursing as he threw all the broken fans, broken chairs, broken pots, and broken bowls my mother had previously picked up out the door. He roared at my mother, "If you pick up this junk again, we are getting a divorce. Go live with whoever you want." My mother was most afraid of my father mentioning divorce, torn between the junk and her tears. She wiped her eyes. My father, annoyed by her crying, took a call from his poker buddy and went out to play cards. I just prayed silently. Mom should have learned her lesson this time and shouldn't pick up trash anymore. Only after throwing away the trash at the door did I feel a sharp pain in my calf. Earlier, when my father kicked the stool. It had hit my leg, leaving a large bluish-purple bruise. I couldn't find the first aid kit, so I went to ask my mother, "Mom, where did you put the first aid kit?" My mother casually grabbed a large bag. "The medicine is all in here. Find it yourself." My brain exploded instantly. "Where is the first aid kit?" My mother glared at me unhappily. "What first aid kit? Plastic bags work just as well for holding medicine, don't they?" I immediately guessed. "So, you sold the first aid kit?" My mother immediately beamed with pride. "Yes, sold it for 30 yuan. You said that first aid kit was free, so selling it for 30 was a profit." After hearing that, I was so angry my teeth itched. Profit my ass! That first aid kit cost me 800 yuan. I told you it was free because I was afraid you'd think it was too expensive. My mother's previous water cup was plastic. I told her many times that pouring boiling water into a plastic cup is toxic, and forbade her from using it. I threw it away several times, only for her to pick it up again. She could even pick up different styles, until I bought her a new ceramic cup and told her it was a promotional gift. She finally agreed to use it. Things like the toothbrush she used to brush off hair removal cream, the slippers worn until the soles were threadbare, socks with holes in 5 toes, and heels. Anything I told her was a free gift. She used gladly. So, I specifically told her this first aid kit was also a free gift to reassure her. Unexpectedly, she actually sold the first aid kit. Sold is sold. It was too late to say anything now. I tore open the plastic bag to look for medicine, but no matter how I searched, I couldn't find the bottle of swelling and pain relief spray. Where is the swelling and pain relief spray? Did you and Dad use it up? My mother, when did you buy swelling and pain relief spray? My arm still hurts. She even leaned over to help me search. I immediately realized, did you sell the medicine in the first aid kit too? My mother looked matter of fact. Who would want your broken box if I didn't sell the medicine with it? Finally, I could no longer suppress my anger. You sold the whole box, including the medicine, for 30 yuan total. My mother, seeing my loud voice, raised hers even higher. It was free anyway. Making 30 was pretty good. Worst case, you can go get another free one. I gritted my molars to stop myself from calling her a stupid idiot. The box plus medicine cost me 800 yuan. My mother sold it for 30, but no matter how excessive, she was my biological mother, who gave birth to me and raised me. After several deep breaths, I asked, "Did you spray medicine on your arm?" Seeing me showing weakness, my mother's face also showed a kind, loving smile. Using this, she pulled a small bottle of medicated oil from under a pillow with 4 patches. I looked at that bottle of medicated oil and was stunned. The one I used when I was little. My mother was quite proud. "Yes, your sister used it when she was little too. That antique medicated oil. Forget the production date. Probably the manufacturer had gone bankrupt decades ago." I realized there might be even more outrageous things. So I rustled and poured all the medicine out of the plastic bag. Sure enough, I saw the fever reducers, anti-inflammatory drugs, and sore throat medicines I had bought for her at high prices during the pandemic, all still packed nicely in a bag. My mother snatched the bag back. "You said these medicines were expensive and hard to get back then, so I couldn't bear to eat them." Furious, he snatched its seat bag and slammed it on the ground. "You couldn't bear to eat them then. Now they are expired." The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, screaming hysterically. "Back when we were quarantined separately, every time I asked if you took your medicine, you told me you did. In the end, you and Dad were sent to the hospital unconscious with pneumonia, leaving behind a bunch of sequelae." My mother immediately had a justification. The state treated me. It didn't cost your money. I cursed in anger, right? The medical fees were paid by the state. Who paid the 5,800 yuan for your? And Dad's caregivers? Did you chip in a dime? If this went on, I was afraid I would lose control and hit her. Keep saving then. If you aren't afraid of dying, keep saving like this. Before leaving, I couldn't help but slap myself. If I ever care about you again, I must be out of my mind. I went back to my room in a huff, seeing I hadn't shown weakness or apologized for a long time. My mother cursed me for being unfilial, a white-eyed wolf, and that I would die a terrible death. For the next few days, my mother gave me the cold shoulder with her weird sarcasm. As long as she didn't cause trouble, I couldn't be bothered to acknowledge her. One day, I had just gotten home from work when my mother showed off the discounted potatoes she had bought. 30 cents a pound. I grabbed 30 pounds. That whole group of people couldn't outgrab me. I looked at that bag of green, sprouted potatoes, my anger rising. I've told you countless times, this kind of green, sprouted potato is inedible, even if cooked. It's poisonous. I took out a small potato with leaves, never mind small sprouts. Look at this one. The sprouts have grown leaves. Afraid she wouldn't believe me, I even found expert science popularization videos for her to watch. After watching, she looked dismissive. You believe expert talk? We ate this kind of potato when we were kids, and we still grew up fine. You are just pretentious. You are just afraid of dying. I knew I couldn't stop her. If you want to eat it yourself. Don't come to me if you get diarrhea. My mother cursed me for being a spendthrift while clanging away cooking her potatoes. After cooking, she played the loving mother and called me to eat. I had no choice but to be dragged to the dining table by her scolding. She clanged away, putting potatoes in my bowl. I stewed them until they were very soft. Try it if you don't believe me. I really didn't want to eat poisonous potatoes and end up with diarrhea or hospitalized. So I took the opportunity of my father coming home to shove my bowl into his hands, then excused myself to take a work call, and left, as expected. When I returned, the two of them were fighting over the toilet. My father kicked me in the stomach in anger. It's all your fault for giving me that bowl of potatoes. My mother threw a trash can at me. You knew it was poisonous. Why didn't you throw that bag of potatoes away? I knew you can't reason with a mad dog. I obediently admitted all faults and kindly reminded them to take medicine. My mother immediately reacted, ecstatically covering her butt and looking for medicine. My father followed, covering his butt and looking for my mother. I just sneered coldly and entered my room. Medicine wouldn't help anyway, because all that big bag of medicine my mother had was expired. An hour later, my bedroom door was pounded. As soon as I opened the door, a pungent smell hit me. I looked down to see my mother's pants, soiled with filth. She clutched her stomach. Quick, take me and your dad to the hospital. We can't hold on. We are dehydrated from diarrhea. My father clutched his stomach, moaning. The medicine isn't working. Hurry and take us to the hospital. I hypocritically ran to my mother's room and took out that large bag of medicine. You can't dehydrate. Severe dehydration is life-threatening. Hurry and drink some oral rehydration salts first. I found the oral rehydration salts, but saw the shelf life had expired 3 years ago. They fought over the expired oral rehydration salts. In the end, my father was stronger and drank more than my mother. However, after drinking the oral rehydration salts, their diarrhea got even worse. My mother cried and swore a venomous oath. I will never eat poisonous potatoes again in the future. I'd rather die than eat rotten vegetable leaves. Seeing she finally realized her mistake, I called 120 and sent them both to the hospital. They won't shed tears until they see the coffin. I thought Mom should know she was wrong, as I wished My mother learned her lesson this time. After returning from the hospital, the first thing she did was throw away the remaining 20+ pounds of poisonous potatoes. However, I hadn't been happy for 3 days before her other actions refreshed my understanding of saving. On the weekend, my cousin from my aunt's side came to the house with her child for a meal. The child was growing and liked meat, so I ordered pork knuckles, chicken wings, and seafood, afraid my mother would be reluctant to spend money. I took the child to the supermarket to buy groceries and came back to cook. While eating, my mother complained about how expensive the table of food was. After my cousin and the child left, my mother immediately picked up the large bones the child had discarded in the trash without finishing the meat. While cursing the child for wasting food, she gnawed on them, her mouth oily. She even picked up the crab shells the child had eaten and sucked on them. While washing dishes, I reminded her, "Your stomach hasn't fully recovered. Don't eat such greasy food." She turned around and cursed me. "It's all your fault. If you had made less, would the child have wasted so much?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, cousin is your relative. Besides, the cousin and the child rarely come once." My mother wouldn't listen at all, yelling at me with her oily mouth. "How did I give birth to such an impractical thing like you? If your sister were home, she definitely wouldn't be such a spendthrift as you." Thinking of my sister currently operating a sewing machine, my mother gnawed on the bones while cursing. "Why couldn't it be you sitting in jail? It would have been great if you had gone to jail." I gave a self-deprecating smile, feeling my sincerity had been fed to the dogs. Seeing me about to pour out the pig's trotter soup with large oil flakes floating on top, my mother cursed me for wasting and being a spendthrift. I forcibly suppressed the words I wanted to stop her and poured all the dregs into her bowl. "Mom, drink up. Don't waste it. Drink more oil tonight. You can save on cooking oil tomorrow." My mother actually looked serious. "You are right." I sneered, secretly vowing, if I pity this woman again, I am a bitch. Even if she died tonight, it would be her own fault. At 9 o'clock in the evening, my premonition came true. My mother called me while I was at my best friend's house applying a facial mask. She called me a dozen times, but I didn't answer. Out of filial duty, I called 120 and slowly walked home. In the hospital, watching my mother writhing in pain, I couldn't feel sorry for her anymore. My heart was made of flesh too, but it didn't turn cold in a day. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, my sister had been in prison for half a year. When she came out, she was old and thin. Entering the supermarket, she swept through it like a raid, grabbing whatever was expensive and high-end. When my sister carried home over 5,000 yuan worth of snacks, my mother sat on the ground and cried loudly. It would take me 10 years of picking bottles to afford that bag of snacks. "You go return it immediately. Not a single item left." Unable to stand my mother's crying and fussing, my sister actually went to return them. For the next few days, my sister looked for work. Because of her criminal record, no school wanted her. The boyfriend she had been dating also broke up with her. At the dinner table that day, my sister aggressively demanded that our parents buy her a house. "If you hadn't stuffed those bottles of drink into my luggage, how could I have gone to jail? If I hadn't gone to jail, I'd be a teacher by now. How could I be worried about finding a partner or affording a house?" My mother pulled her usual tricks, acting aggrieved, wiping tears. "It's all for your own good." Regarding the drink matter, I did it all for your own good. But this time, my sister wasn't buying her act. When Dad invited the official to dinner to pull strings, he told you 1,000 times to be discreet. Discreet? Were you kicked by a donkey? Dad gave you 100,000 yuan for gifts. Why did you change it to 10 yuan bills, giving the official a total of 500 yuan in gifts? How did you even think of that? My mother was even more aggrieved. 500 yuan is already a lot. I would have to pick bottles and cardboard for 3 months to make 500 yuan. The 5 stacks of money used for the bribe were illegal proceeds and confiscated by the police. My mother was still angry about it. We gave that official a gift. What business was it of those damn police? Are those police brain damaged? Why did they confiscate our 500 yuan? My sister cried in anger. My father, seeing my mother was unrepentant, furiously overturned the table, and my mother could only apologize, wipe away tears, and say it's for your own good. And when my father found her annoying, she would bang her head against the door panel, threatening to die, saying she might as well go hang herself, but she was also afraid of dying. If she had a headache, cold, or fever, she would stuff handfuls of medicine into her mouth. Because my sister had operated the sewing machine, she couldn't find a decent job. Depressed, she went to bars to drown her sorrows and made many questionable friends. In the end, she took a shortcut and started doing work where she could make money lying down. My father was fired from his previous company, leaving a stain on his record, and finally found a job as a salesperson. But he was unwilling to remain a low-level salesman and was bent on using connections to get promoted. Finally, he used unclean means to sleep with the big boss's wife, taking photos and recording videos, attempting to threaten the boss's wife to get a promotion. As a result, he was beaten until his leg was broken by people sent by the boss's wife. When he was hospitalized for surgery and needed money, my mother called me, Chin Xan, come over and pay for your father's surgery. I said I had no money and hung up directly. 3 minutes later, my father called me again, get over here and pay up, otherwise you won't live either. My eyes were full of ferocity. You want money? I'll give it to you. I'll burn it for you. I used traffic as an excuse and arrived at the hospital very late. Based on my understanding, this hospital wouldn't perform surgery without payment, given my father's intolerance for even a little pain. There was no way he would wait for me to pay. Sure enough, when I arrived, my mother had already used her pension to pay for my father. After my father woke up, I immediately ordered food for them, washing and wiping them down, being extremely attentive. However, whenever a nurse came into the ward with a payment slip, my phone would ring, coincidentally, and I'd have to go to the company. Thus, I didn't pay a single cent of my father's surgery and hospitalization fees. My mother, wanting to save money, pestered the doctor to let my father go home to recuperate. After making them sign a liability waiver, the doctor let them discharge and repeatedly urged my father to take medicine on time and in the right dosage, forbidding smoking and alcohol. But my father was a long-time smoker and drinker. He couldn't bear it at all. Sure enough, after returning home, my mother placed my father's tobacco and alcohol by his bedside, under my father's excited gaze. She even lit a cigarette for him. When I came home from work and saw the cigarette pack by my father's bed, along with half a plate of peanuts and a small half bottle of white wine, I was shocked. But what did his death have to do with me? So, after my father took ceftriaxone, watching my mother pour him wine, I smiled and handed over the peanuts. My mother watched my father drink with satisfaction, her face beaming with kindness. I looked at my father, then at my mother, and smiled. Mom, you really are the best mother in the world. My mother modestly poured wine for my father, as long as you know gratitude. The next second, my mother asked about my salary. Xr, how much do you make a month? I smiled. No matter how much I make a month, you won't get to spend it, nor will you live long enough to spend it. My father, drunk, pointed at me and cursed. Chin Xan, what do you mean? I mean, you are about to die. My mother, disgusted that I was cursing my father to die early, tried to slap me, but I caught her wrist and pushed her away. Before leaving, I took one last look at my father. You deserve to die. Then I said to my mother, you are amazing, managing to kill your man. Ceftriaxone plus alcohol means immediate departure. My father, aided by my mother, increased the dosage of ceftriaxone and alcohol. If he didn't die, it would be an injustice to heaven. At my father's funeral, my mother couldn't spare the time to grieve. She took plastic bags to pack up the food from every table, not even sparing the leftover fish soup at the bottom. This action of hers stunned the relatives and friends visiting the funeral. Embarrassed, I stood far away. After my father died, I rented an apartment outside and rarely went home. A month later, I suddenly received a call from my mother saying my sister was pregnant and asked me to come back. When I returned, my sister was vomiting uncontrollably. My mother kept asking whose child it was, asked if the other party had a house or a car, also pressed for how much betrothal gift they intended to give. She even gave my sister ideas, saying if the other party didn't offer double the betrothal gift, they should abort the child. My sister had severe morning sickness and didn't want to talk to her at all. My mother was kicked out, but less than 3 minutes later, she used bringing food to my sister as an excuse to enter her room again. This is the braised pork I packed from your father's funeral feast. I couldn't bear to eat it. I saved it all for you. Furious, my sister smashed her plate. Get out! Before evening arrived, my mother started her mischief again. This time, she entered with fish soup. This is the fish soup packed from your father's funeral feast. Mom picked out all the bones for you. Drink it while it's hot. Sure enough, my sister, who had just finished a round of vomiting and lay down, was stimulated by the fishy smell and vomited again. She stormed into the kitchen and poured the entire pot of fish soup over my mother's body, pouring it over her head. She also smashed the empty pot on her head. You really deserve to die. You caused me to sit in jail for half a year, prevented me from becoming a teacher, and now you want to vomit me to death. Your man was killed by you. How could you have the heart to pack food from his funeral feast? You old hag, why couldn't it be you who died? My mother was stunned by the scolding. She screeched at the top of her lungs, cursing my sister for being unfilial, and again threatened suicide by hanging or jumping. My sister stopped her with one sentence. If you want to die, go die somewhere far away. Don't die in this house. Otherwise, the house will become a haunted house and won't sell for a good price. My mother's pension had been mostly spent on my father's surgery and hospitalization. She still counted on selling the house for retirement, so she immediately dropped the idea of hanging or jumping. The next day, my sister listed the house with an agency. When I found out, I immediately asked my sister for money. Unwilling to care for my mother, my sister gave me 2/3 of the house payment. A week later, a couple came to take over the house. Only then did my mother realize the house had been sold by my sister. She was so angry she had a heart attack and a cerebral hemorrhage. The couple couldn't reach my sister on the phone, so they called me. I arrived slowly at the hospital. The emergency doctor was waiting for me to sign the surgery consent form. My mother kept holding my hand, begging me to save her. Her voice was very small, just airflow. I cried loudly, hugging her. Mom, I know, you have been frugal all your life, and don't want me to waste money on you unnecessarily. I'll listen to you. Let's not treat it. My mother urgently tugged at me. Treat it? I want treatment. I squeezed her hand back, crying even louder. I know. You don't want to burden me. You want to go to a nursing home. My mother tried to push me away to pull the doctor, but I held her tightly, refusing to let go, crying like a person whose heart was breaking. Mom, you are the best mom in the world. Finally, whether from anger or from my strangling, my mother passed out anyway. When she woke up, I had already signed the form abandoning surgery. Retribution has come. My mother was paralyzed on one side. I used her pension to choose the cheapest pair of crutches for her. Finally, I sent her to the cheapest nursing home she had her eye on, finding her a cheap, foul-tempered caregiver. In the first few days after sending her there, I would visit her after work every day. After my mother's stroke, her speech became slurred, and she drooled constantly, making her clothes and pillows filthy. She would yell that she had pooped or peed, pointing to her crotch, wanting a diaper change. I immediately comforted her. I know you are frugal. No change. No change. Wait until you've filled it up before changing. My mother, with a crooked mouth, yelled, "Change." I immediately assured her, Okay, I'll change it once it's full." When my mother grabbed my hand, reaching for her pants, I immediately grabbed my bag and left. "Okay, I'll go renew your fees right now." Leaving the ward, I was in a great mood. I just wanted my mother to experience what frugality meant. Later, I went several more times. Every time I left, my mother begged me to take her home. And every time, I would tell her, just as she had done to me before, "It's like talking to a duck. I can't understand her words." Having finally sent her here, take her away, she was dreaming. Later, I saw the caregiver cursing at my mother while wiping her feces and urine. "You old hag, you eat a lot and poop a lot. Stop yelling with your crooked mouth and slanted eyes." I always waited until the caregiver had changed the clothes and diaper before going in, even from a distance. I could smell the stench on my mother, but I smiled and thanked the caregiver. "Auntie, thank you for taking such good care of my mother." My mother yelled gibberish with her crooked mouth about how bad the caregiver was. I pretended not to understand and apologetically explained to everyone, if my mother hadn't harmed my sister, maybe my sister would come visit her. However, I can't blame my sister. If my mother hadn't secretly stuffed drugs into her suitcase, she wouldn't have caused my sister to sit in jail for half a year. And my father, it was also because my mother wanted to save money and didn't let him stay in the hospital that she killed him with her own hands. The nursing home is also a society. Caregivers read the room, and the old men and women inside read the room too, hearing about all the bad things my mother had done. The caregiver's attitude toward her became even worse. Diaper changes were even more casual. My mother's body began to fester and stink. Seeing my mother paralyzed in bed and unable to move, the old men and women, Shanqi, disgusted by her stench, would snatch her snacks when the caregiver wasn't around, curse at her, and spit in her face. What daughter-in-law would be stuck with an old hag like you who can't understand human speech? It's 8 lifetimes of bad luck. At this point, my goal had been achieved. Finally, one afternoon, my mother started crying uncontrollably when she saw me. I knew my mother had finally realized her past mistakes. I was wrong. Take me out of here. I smiled and waved my hand. "No, you said before, when you get old and can't move, you'll live in a nursing home. It's cheap here, and you chose it yourself." I pulled over a chair and counted her mistakes one by one. "Your unscrupulous ways of saving money killed your own man. Your habit of taking petty advantages ruined your biological daughter's bright future. Oh, right. Do you know what your daughter is doing now that she can't be a teacher?" I leaned close to her. "Your daughter is working as a hooker." My mother collapsed, wailing loudly. I picked up my bag and left. "My good mother, I'm going to pay your fees now, the 2-year full care kind." My mother crawled toward me, crying, begging me to take her away. "If it's full care, they will torment me to death." I left with a smile. You spent your whole life tormenting others, and now you want to die in peace. I received a call from the hospital to find out my sister had an accident. Outside the ward, I saw a middle-aged woman sitting on my sister, slapping her face. Slit, with your looks. You want to use the child to climb up the social ladder. I've dealt with more mistresses than you've seen women. Look at yourself in the mirror and see what you weigh. If you dare climb into a married man's bed again, I'll cut off those 2 lumps of flesh and send you 20 breeding boars. I entered the ward only after the woman left. My sister's pig-like face was unrecognizable, and I still mocked her. Sister, with this face, I'm afraid you won't be able to receive clients for a week. My sister tearfully cried, I don't dare to be a hooker anymore. Those women are like lunatics. They'll beat me to death. Several aunts in the same ward came over gossiping to watch the excitement. I took the opportunity to kindly call the doctor and nurse to examine and change my sister's dressings. In front of the whole room, I lectured her with disappointment. I told you 1,000 times not to be an escort or a mistress, but you just wouldn't listen. Now you are destroying other people's marriages and families, trying to steal their men, and attempting to use the child to climb the social ladder. Getting slapped by her is considered light. If that woman hadn't taken a knife to stab you, it would have been light. After scolding her, I pretended to take a call and left, thanks to my publicity. My sister didn't even stay a day in the hospital before being discharged. She was angry that I had ruined her reputation and blocked me downstairs at my apartment, coming up to hit me as soon as she saw me. But I wouldn't give her the chance. If you weren't a home wrecker and didn't destroy families, would that woman have come to the hospital to slap your face? I deliberately brought up her past dream. It's all Mom's fault. If she hadn't been greedy for small advantages, you wouldn't have gone to jail, nor would you have ended up accompanying drinkers and getting slapped in the face by a woman as a mistress. I saw your classmate Chin Shasha the other day. She married a tall, rich, and handsome guy, driving an Audi A8. I was so envious I could die. Before I finished speaking, my sister left in a huff. I smiled watching my sister's back. I knew she was definitely going to find my mother. That night, I received a call from the nursing home. By the time I got there, my mother was already stiff. Moreover, the whole room smelled of feces, and my mother's body was covered in filth, with feces still at the corner of her mouth. And my sister was standing next to my mother, crying and laughing like a madwoman, when the funeral home staff came to take my mother's body away. She went crazy and gave her 2 extra kicks. If it weren't for your greed for small advantages, I wouldn't have ended up like this. Old hag, you finally died. The police came by checking the surveillance and witnessed testimony from the same ward. It was my sister who used my mother's shit-stained diaper to cover her mouth until she was half dead, and then force-fed her shit. My mother was choked to death by the shit my sister fed her. Later, my sister was handcuffed by the police and taken into the car. She looked at the handcuffs and seemed to finally realize she had killed someone and was going to jail again. She knelt in front of me, begging me to sign a letter of understanding. Save me. If I go in again, my life is over. But everything I did was to get her inside. How could I grant her wish? I shook my head with a smile. Your real retribution is coming. Sure enough, less than a week after she went in, I received a call from the prison administrator saying my sister had cervical cancer and had also been diagnosed with AIDS, and she wanted to see me. My sister had a chaotic private life and already had severe sexually transmitted diseases and gynecological issues. It was perfectly normal for her to contract cervical cancer and AIDS after going to prison. She had only been inside for a week. Yet, she looked like she had aged more than 10 years. and her mental state was worrying. Her first sentence upon meeting was, "I want to get out to get treatment." I asked her, "Do you have money?" "My sister. I am your biological sister." I smiled. "Mom was frugal all her life. You should learn from Mom. Anyway, whether you treat it or not, you will die. Don't treat it." Less than a month later, my sister died. I laid her to rest next to my father and mother, letting the three of them go to the underworld to settle their scores and seek revenge. As for me, I have a decent job with a good salary, and the rest of my life is full of blessings.